Welcome. Today we're going to explore the core mechanics of the adventurer's mind, priming. We often talk about learning or preparing, but in the context of primed adventuring, we are talking about something more specific. We are talking about the deliberate construction of the cognitive architecture you need to navigate a future that you cannot predict. To understand how this works, we first have to look at how the brain is already doing it right now, without your permission. I want you to imagine a scenario. You land at a foreign airport, somewhere you've never been before. You are sleep deprived, you don't know the language, and you've got a very tight connection to make. So there's a sense of chaos, right? And yet, somehow you make it. You navigate the signage that you've never seen before, you anticipate security protocols you haven't read, and you find your gate. How do you do that? You aren't recalling a specific memory of this airport. You've never been here. You're relying on something else. You're relying on a generative model in your mind that predicts how airports generally work. You're using the past to solve a novel problem in the present. Neuroscience, specifically the work of Jeff Hawkins, and cognitive psychology, specifically Andy Clark, tell us that the brain is not just a storage device for facts. It's a prediction machine. Your brain uses reference frames, physical location-based maps stored in your neocortex, to constantly project what should happen next. Consider the escalator or travelator illusion. You step onto a stationary escalator or travelator that you thought was moving. You will physically lurch forward, right? And it will be very uncomfortable. Why? Because the brain predicted the movement and adjusted your balance before you took the step. When reality clashed with that prediction, you felt a prediction error. This continuous loop of prediction and correction is the fundamental biology of intelligence. We call this subconscious preparation priming. In psychology, priming refers to how one stimulus influences a response to a subsequent stimulus. But here is the challenge. Usually that happens automatically. The goal of primed adventuring is to take this automatic biological process and make it much more deliberate, to create a sense of awareness around it. We want to take control of the prediction machine, but to do that, we have to understand that there are two fundamentally different ways to prime the mind. Samuel Rocker gives us a beautiful analogy. He reminds us that priming and painting can look like the same action. They both involve brushing a substance onto a surface, right? But there's a governing order. You must prime the canvas before you paint the image. In education and learning, we often confuse the two. We try to paint the detailed picture, the specific facts, without actually preparing the surface, that is, the cognitive architecture. We need to distinguish between priming for what we know and priming for what we don't know. The first type of priming is what traditional education quite often excels at. I call this priming into the past. This is based on the work of educational psychologist David Ausubel, who argued that the most important factor in learning is what the learner already knows. Teachers prime students by connecting new information to existing neural pathways through associations. This works great for known tasks, but it tends to create brittle knowledge. it relies on the context remaining the same. If the world changes, if the airport rules change completely, this type of knowledge collapses because it looks backward for the answer. The primed adventurer requires a different approach. This is priming into the future. This isn't about recalling fact, it's about building architecture required for self-negotiated action. We're building new neural pathways derived from lessons from living. We aren't creating a script for a play that we've already read or seen. We are building a set of mental models, or generative models, that allow us to improvise in a play that hasn't been written yet. This type of priming is orchestrated by you, the learner, based on the immediate needs of your life. So, here's the critical distinction to keep in mind. When we think about connecting through priming into the past, we're talking about making connections to what already exists. It's all about associations. It's for the known world. When we're dealing with into the future, we're trying to build the cognitive architecture that needs to exist. So it's about construction. It's all about preparing ourselves for an unknown world. Primed adventuring is specifically concerned with the latter. We are preparing the mind to handle vu-jay day, the opposite of deja vu, where we have that experience of being in a place that you've never been, you have no idea what to do, and yet you're still able to function. So let's apply this. We mentioned in the previous lecture Adventurer 1, the anxious individual. This person is stuck. They have a calling, an unlived life waiting to unfold, but they are paralyzed by fear and frustration. Again, as Matthew Arnold wrote, they're wandering between two worlds, one dead, one powerless to be born. Their anxiety destroys their self-awareness. They can't act because they are reacting to their internal fear rather than reading the external reality. So how do we prime this person? How do we ensure that we're not doing it just simply by trying to give them more facts? Well, we do it by giving them cognitive tools. We prime this type of adventurer by helping them to build a completion complex, a specific set of integrated mental models. Now we can just take as an example here 6 very specific related tools. We've got subject-object balance, which is all about being able to manage fear, those things that we fear or that control us. We have the reasonable adventurer, where we've got a great focus on being able to tolerate ambiguity. We have a nice focus on the resource profile, to understand what the adventurer is actually starting with and what they need. We're very considerate of constant and variable characters so that we can make sure we can adapt to different situations without losing our own sense of being. Environmental reading, we use this to be able to see threats and opportunities accurately. And while all of this is happening, we're very mindful of the notion of a horizon of expectations, because all of those prediction areas which we're going to be experience, they're going to be enabling us to update our ability to make future predictions. Let's look at the most critical one for the anxious mind. The gateway tool is subject-object balance. Based on the work of Robert Kegan, right now, Adventurer 1 is subject to their fear. The fear has them. They look through the fear like a pair of glasses. So everything looks scary. They can't manage the fear because they are the fear. To prime them, we must help them to move that fear to object. They need to take off those metaphoric glasses and actually look at the glasses. When the fear becomes an object, something you have rather than something that has you, you can examine it, you can critique it, you can manage it. This shift is the foundation of agency. But here's the secret. The power isn't in any single tool. It's in the integration of these mental models. We call this the interject multiplier effect. Inter means to look between the models, and ject means to cast doubt. So we never make the assumption that the models that we're developing will always be applicable or always be applicable through the same combinations of integration. So when Adventurer 1 combines subject-object balance, looking at their fear, with environmental reading, looking at their reality, they have a good opportunity to be able to triangulate truth. They realise, I feel unsafe, what they're subject to, but the environment is actually quite stable. The model works together to multiply their effectiveness. This is how we build robust cognitive architecture. This brings us to a vital realisation about how we learn. As Frederick Bartlett told us nearly 100 years ago, memory is not a reproduction, it's a construction. We don't have a video recorder in our heads. We have a construction site. Priming isn't about perfectly recalling the past. It's about using fragments of your past experiences, your failures, your lessons, your observations, to construct new models that can predict a future you haven't yet seen. You are constantly rebuilding your own mind, in other words. This ultimately is the definition of primed adventuring. It's the deliberate construction of your cognitive architecture. It's a process of building new neural pathways from your lived events, from lessons from living, to improve your capacity for adventuring, for creating opportunities for satisfaction. So, as you leave here, ask yourself, are you painting over a canvas that hasn't yet been prepared? Are you relying on brittle knowledge from the past? Or are you doing the hard work of priming your mind for the unknown? Do join me again for the third lecture in the series, where we'll stop for a moment and unpack what actually constitutes an authentic adventure.